G'day there, ladies and gents of the internet. I am the Braveheart Aussie and welcome to a journey in world building. And welcome back to the last of our deep dive episodes here in the world of Onov. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the local terrors that plague the people of Onov. Now, we've already examined in brief detail the dangers posed by the surface instability of the world, as well as the dangers and threats caused by the mega engineering related industrial accidents. Overall, Onov is a comparatively safe world in the Diaspora, and while not as innately habitable as Lost Earth prior to the War of Cataclysm and the Madagascar impact, it is itself an inherently habitable planet, which provides a baseline level of benefit to the people that at most settings within the Dark Diaspora lack. No breathing apparatuses are required, the atmosphere or the environment is not filled with toxins or caustic substances, and there's no strange or unusual attributes of the planet geomagnetically, gravitationally, or other type of factor that otherwise impact its viability. So today we're going to be examining three very distinct elements of the planet that represent challenges for human life on Onov. The first is the impact of the age of the planet and the breakdown of the integrity of the surface of the world, rendering much of the terrain impassable or unsuitable for widespread or large-scale settlement. We will also explore the unique and somewhat narrow nature of the ecosystem and biome of the world, including those elements which represent significant risks to human life. Finally, we're just going to touch very quickly on the nature of the highly concentrated living in the mega engineering structures that dominate the surface of the planet. Onov is over 11 billion years old, making it an extremely old world in comparison to both Lost Earth and planets within the wider Dark Diaspora. While the planet itself orbits a hyperstable red dwarf star about 50% of the size of Old Sol, this length of life of the planet and the star has meant that even with this stability, it has been subject to all manner of solar flares, tectonic and geomagnetic changes, and of course, galactic and local radiation. Coupled with surface erosion from wind and rain, and the surface of the planet has broken down significantly over the eons, and is now dominated by large pits of small stone and rock referred to as rubble pits, or for the larger ones, rubble seas. These low-lying basins extend down to bedrock and are filled with compacted and loose aggregate and rock, most of which is smaller than that of a fingernail. While not covering the entirety of the planet, this geological feature accounts for about 3/4 of the non-aquatic surface. And this share is even higher when uninhabitable far north and southern latitudes are removed, and only the habitable zone of the planet is considered. While this is a limiting factor to the extent of the spread of settlements across the planet, it also represents a direct risk and challenge to the people of the world. The pits themselves lack the capacity to support a person standing on them and function very similar to quicksand, with any movement or struggle seeing the person sink deeper and deeper into the pits until they are crushed by the weight of the rock and stone. This was a more prevalent issue on the planet during the early settlement period, and now is primarily a risk for those who are tasked with functions that take them beyond the cities and mega engineering structures to the surface of the planet. These individuals are globally referred to as Rubble Runners and can vary in their jobs and functions, but all share the common attribute of working in the field. The risk of these rubble areas is partially addressed by the Rubble Runners wearing large tennis racket sized skirts around the soles of their shoes, similar to snowshoes in Lost Earth. These have the effect of spreading the weight of the individual over a larger patch of rock, allowing them to take steps in an area without starting to fall or sink into the rock itself. This does not prevent risk of large rubble movements or rock slides that can still occasionally engulf crews or vehicles alike. In fact, the overall instability of the planetary surface means it's only a matter of time until a rubble runner is subjected to a danger or threat associated with the surface, and as much as possible, surface contact is left to the bare minimum. While anti-gravity in other aircraft may seem like a possible solution, any downforce on the planetary surface can be highly disruptive, triggering further deterioration, land and rock slides, and even the expansion of the unstable areas for no-go areas for people. This deteriorated surface also means that wind and rain erosion continues to be a constant problem, with dust storms being one of the most dangerous forms of natural events on the planet. Storm fronts can pick up millions of tons of surface material in the form of tiny flecks, while the lack of major mountainous features on much of the planet means that the winds can often blow for weeks or even months on end unimpeded and go entirely the way around the planet. Being caught out in these dust storms without protection can be a deadly situation, not only making it difficult to breathe, but also causing rubble runners to need to find urgent shelter. However, an even bigger short-term risk to rubble runners is the sometimes ferocious wildlife of the planet. While the biosphere of the world is relatively homogeneous and lacking in diversity due to its long life, there are several species which are particularly hazardous to rubble runners. Pit vipers, also known as pit serpents or rubble worms, are a large serpentine-like creature measuring 15 to 20 feet in length and up to a foot in thickness. Like most life on the planet, they have a triangular-shaped forward-facing maw that opens up into rows of serrated teeth that oscillate around and shred through rock, flesh and bone. They have no eyes, instead sensing the movement in or on the rubble pit that they call home. For larger prey, like the broad-footed grazing milling beasts that herd across the plains of Onov in their hundreds of thousands, the vipers attack with their long body and bind and immobilize their prey before using their maws to carve into the creature's flesh, often while it's still alive. For smaller creatures like downed fallen leather bats or Bulbnet Trees squirrels, one bite of their maw is usually enough to eviscerate the creature's form. The pit viper bodies are tough, with a thick sinewy form and a rough hide that prevents most damage as they move their way through the fine rubble granules of the pit like it's water. The vipers live in nests, namely small family units of up to 3 to 5 adults, and are highly territorial. There are few places of respite or safety for a rubble runner if they come across a net, and escape is exceedingly difficult given the speed with which the vipers can move. However, one of the few opportunities for refuge is to scale one of the many Bulbnet trees that call the rubble seas home. These trees, of various different species, use their roots to create something of a net or bulb around a large patch of rubble, and it steadily grows and encloses this to act as something like an anchor. These are usually about 5 feet below the surface when they're fully formed, and it results in the trees being able to have a high level of stability in the rain, and also given the instability of the surface. Once the bulb is formed, a taproot then goes down further in search of the water table of the relevant rubble basin that it sits atop, the bedrock. The trees reach about 20 to 30 feet tall and have a series of concentric, upwardly curved branches that ring around the straight trunk and extend in different rings up the tree. This branch configuration, coupled with the comparative strength of the trees in weather events, meant that the canopies can sometimes be used as a semi-permanent refuges by rubble runners, and more densely packed woodlands of the Bulbnet trees were once used by early settlers as a form of elevated residences, with interlinked sky rope bridges before the URA deposited major industrial capacity and shifted the population to the mega engineering structures. Finally, as flagged and as reflected in our most recent lore video, I do want to quickly mention the megastructures themselves. Now, we've already investigated similar hyperconcentrated residential and urban towers on planets such as Ruscon and Galador, and to a lesser degree in Dancer's Leap, so the issues of height and falling and associated accidents are things that we have examined in detail. However, I will add that the industrial nature of Onov's mega engineering installations means that residential living in the world is somewhat of a secondary consideration and is cramped, overcrowded, and highly communal. While this can be somewhat confronting for new residents, including those from more open, expansive planets like Kobka or Getsum Prime in the hegemony, the communities on Onov have evolved over time to be highly communalist, working and living together collaboratively in close quarters. Nevertheless, each year there are a series of accidents, namely falls, and associated injuries and fatalities are recorded across the world, though the numbers are quite small for the size of the population. And this is despite the fact that there is a strong culture of safety on the planet, and the fact that the devolved settlement-specific authorities have a strong focus on health, safety, and security infrastructure and regulations. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are going to be leaving this episode and this setting. I have to say that found it really enjoyable to hold in my mind while looking at this setting the visage of Onov, of large plains that extend out into the horizon of the broken and shattered surface, lightly greened by hardy foliage beneath a very clear blue sky, and found it to be quite a peaceful setting. And the juxtaposition of this clean slate of a world with the enormity and the grandeur of the human ingenuity and engineering provides a stunning contrast that frames the concepts that we've explored in Onov pretty perfectly. We have one more lore episode for this series, exploring the early days of the planet's settlement, after which we will be taking a break from the settlement setting deep dives, and instead looking at faction and threat videos, and also another randomly generated setting. But that is it for today. Thank you so much. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and may the journey continue.
Hey!